Hi guys, hope you're well. Today's video is on the break-off, the do's and don'ts, how to break off well, how to put your opponent in trouble. If you do something wrong, what will happen? We might even look at another top player's break-off and the reason why he did it. But anyway, we're going to try and show you the right way to master the break-off, which has become, well, in the modern game, one of the most important shots in a frame of snooker. So I'm going to try and put you right on the break-off. So the break-off is, well, in the professional game is such an important shot because the players are such great long potters that if you play a bad break-off, they're going to pot a long red and invariably clear up and win the frame, in one visit. So it's such an important shot. But at an amateur level, I think you've got to get the basics right to be able to play a good break-off. Some players you'll watch on TV, they'll have the cue ball closer to the yellow to get a thicker contact on the last red. Some will have the cue ball near the brown to get more of a glancing blow so they can get the more pace in the cue ball around the angles. So once you decide on where you're comfortable placing the cue ball for the break-off, I think you should stick to it. I think that's an important thing because then you know that every time you hit the cue ball, you know where to hit the cue ball to get that same result every time. The main principle, I think, is to get the cue ball as close to this baulk cushion as possible. The tighter the better, because if you get the cue ball glued to this baulk cushion, your opponent's not going to be able to pot a ball. And if he is going to pot a long ball, he's not going to be able to control the cue ball. So the cue ball will be running wild. He won't be able to get good position on one of the high value colours. My preference is to put the cue ball quite close to the brown. I have experimented over the years with the cue ball near the yellow, as I said, to try and get a thicker contact on the last red. Because when you make contact, more often than not in break-offs, you're going to play the last red of the 5 that you can see on the row. So what happens, if you get a thicker contact on this red here will hopefully come off the cushion and go back into the bunch of reds, keeping the reds quite tight and not leaving a long pot. The thinner you hit this red is liable to maybe not reach it and stay around about there. So if your cue ball is short, you can see you're leaving your opponent an easy long pot to start. I say easy, but easy-ish. But it's a shot you don't want to leave your opponent. So there's various ways of playing. I favour now closer to the brown because then in playing the last red with side, we'll get onto the side in a minute, it means I can get more pace in the cue ball. I don't have to hit the cue ball as hard to get the cue ball off 1, 2, 3, and as close to this 4th cushion as possible. So side, you can, if your skill factor is not to a high level, you can play this plain ball, i.e. just hit the middle of the cue ball, and hitting the end red, the cue ball will stay on this side of the table. It's okay, but I find that more difficult to control the speed of the cue ball in getting it close to the cushion. I think if you play with a little bit more pace and side, you're hitting it harder, so you're getting the more chance, I think, to get the cue ball close to this cushion. Another bonus would be, obviously, on the cushion behind the green. That obviously snookers your opponent on the reds. Some players, you'll see, play this side. So obviously, instead of playing right-hand side on this side of the pack, this side of the pack would be left-hand side. So the cue ball would come this side of the table and hopefully be here somewhere behind the yellow. So it's just your preference because everyone's more comfortable playing with a certain side. I myself am more comfortable playing with right-hand side, but some players might be the opposite. But I'm going to play one now then. So, and in partner side, you don't want to play extreme to the right of the cue ball because that will tend to push the cue ball to the left. So you might even not hit your intended last red. You might hit thick on the pack, and then the cue ball stays down that end of the table, reds everywhere, and you've left your opponent an easy chance. So not too far on the right-hand side of the cue ball, and about halfway up the cue ball, even higher than halfway up the cue ball, because you want to give that cue ball the momentum of the topspin to get round the table. So this looks pretty good. Hit the cushion just before the baulk line. And I've got the cue ball, okay, you can see it's not tight to the baulk cushion by any stretch. So it's not really, in a professional game, it's not really a good break-off. And I can see that I've opened the reds the reds have opened up quite nicely, but I've left my opponent a chance of a red, which he can play actually as a shot to nothing, because he can drop it for the black, and should he go for it, the only red he'll miss is the one he's playing. So not the best break-off. It's pretty good. I think in a sort of a league game or an amateur game, it'd be pretty good. But as I say, you want to get the cue ball here. This is where you want it, because then your opponent's got no shot whatsoever. So we're going to play the orthodox break. We're going to go last red. The fact that there's a red covering half of this red means you have to play it at the most half ball, but you want to get it slightly less than half ball with that run inside, which is right hand side. That's pretty good. The good thing about that break-off is we've kept the main bunch of the pack intact. So even if your opponent has left a red, as I have left him here, because it's a shot to nothing, it's a slow red into the corner for the black, the fact that the pack's tightly bunched together apart from one red means it's not the best opportunity for him to get to the table and score heavily. So I'd be quite happy with this break-off. So you see there, I've caught the red much too thin. The cue ball has actually come this side of the blue. I've kind of got away with it. It was a very poor break-off. I haven't struck the red anywhere near where I should have. Decelerated a little bit, which means that by the time the cue ball got to the red, the side had really gone. The energy had gone from the cue ball. So I've got away with it because I haven't left my opponent an easy shot, but that just shows you if you catch the reds too thin, the cue ball just comes in a completely different path, and then you're kind of hoping that you get away with it, which actually I did. Okay, I'm going to do a break-off here, plain ball. This is a break-off you see in snooker clubs up and down the country by sort of amateurs and beginners, because they've not got to the standard, obviously, of playing side like professionals. So playing this break-off plain ball means you're not hitting the cue ball as hard as you would be if you were playing the more orthodox way, the sort of professional way, as it were, of playing with side off 3-4 cushions. We're only playing off 2 cushions here, so you're hitting it softer. So if you're in a club where the tables might not be as level as in a professional arena, you know, sometimes the cue ball can deviate on the way to the reds. You know, I've seen people in clubs missing the reds altogether, possibly for that reason, but it's so much more difficult to judge the pace when you're hitting the middle of the cue ball. As you see, you're coming up the other side of the table, you're not swinging the cue ball around the angles. I mean, that's not bad. We haven't left our opponents a pot. I mean, you might get some crazy players going for this one down the cushion, but it's a pretty safe break-off. It's pretty dull, to be fair. I don't like it. And another thing there, if you're playing a professional game, look at, we've tied the black up as well, which is not good. A negative or more percentage break-off can sometimes lead to long, scrappy frames because the colours can get tied up, and then you get those frames that last for 30, 40 minutes, which, let's be fair, nobody wants to watch. There has been some different break-offs played in the game. Last season, Mark Williams, you might have seen, played the slow one cushion. He placed the cue ball near the yellow and just come off the black cushion with a touch of left-hand side, just to roll dead weight into the pack. Now, everyone thought that was quite a negative break-off, but it was quite a positive one, because although his shot is negative, the next shot, the only shot that his opponent can play is to put the cue ball on the black cushion. Then Mark Williams can play a positive safety shot, bringing the cue ball back up the table. So it wasn't really that negative, but the only reason he did it was because what I said in the beginning, he kept on leaving his opponent long pots, and they would invariably pot one and make a big break. So he was sick of it. So he basically said, I'm going to play a break-off that doesn't leave my opponent a pot at all. Consequently, he's gone back to the sort of the more normal break-off. But now basically, you're just putting the cue ball near the yellow. We're going to come off the cushion, the black cushion, with the left-hand side, just dead weight into the back of the pack. It's not the most exciting shot in the world. I mean, that's not going to get anyone signing up to play snooker anytime soon, but in a way it became quite effective, but yeah, very dull, very dull. There is a more extreme break-off that you could do. Say you got an opponent that you're very, very confident of beating. I sometimes do this in exhibition matches when you want to get a chance to make a big break. So basically, the Mark Williams break, where we played slow off the black cushion with the left-hand side, we play the same line, but we play at pace. So if you want to really put your opponent under pressure, you want to show them who's boss, this is what you do. Left-hand side. And you basically do that and say to your opponent, let's see what you can do. We've seen the perils of catching the break-off thin, where the cue ball was running up this side of the table and out of control, really in and out of bulk. I'm going to try and demonstrate what happens if you catch it too thick. So, as I said, some players like to put the cue ball near the yellow, that gives you more chance of catching it thick. So, with the side, you could actually catch the wrong red. And, well, I've caught the wrong red, but yeah, I've left the red over the pocket. And if you, by catching the reds thick off the break-off, you'd no real control of where the red's going to end up. And more often than not, a red actually does stay over the pocket. And then, obviously, you leave your opponent a chance to pot that red, get on the black, and go in and win the frame. So I'd always prefer, if you were going to play a break-off shot wrongly, I prefer the thin option rather than the thick option. The thick option, you know, I was lucky there. I got the cue ball back up to the bulkhead. More often than not, it stays down there where the reds are. The thin option, at least the cue ball is coming back up the table. So when you're breaking off, I would say err on the side of a thin contact rather than thick, and more chance of getting away with it. Okay, so I'm going to try and do the perfect break-off. This is a break-off I would use in a match. It is the end red with running side, right-hand side to come off 3 and try and reach this 4th cushion. Tighten the bulk cushion behind the green. 2, reds are nice and tight. 3 cushion, 4th cushion. Yep, I've not left my opponent a pot on. I'm very happy with that. So hopefully you've learned more about the break-off and the do's and the don'ts. And if you like this, like what you've seen, please don't forget to like and subscribe and leave comments on any shots you'd like to see in the future on this YouTube channel. Thank you very much for watching.